Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and welcome back to Goosejunkies. Tonight, for our 33rd episode, we have decided to do a well requested one that I know people have been asking for since, episode 1 through 10 days. We're going to be facing off a classic and beloved original 62 Goosebumps story, Calling All Creeps, against a well known Haunting Hour episode and short story that comes from the Nightmare Hour short story collection called Alien Candy. Tonight, as usual, I'm joined with my two favorite Goosebumps YouTubers in the game right now. We have the Horrorlander and Micah, the Ultimate Goosebumps Man. How are you guys doing tonight?
Yo, 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 people and patrons of the night. It's your boy, the Horrorlander. Welcome back to the podcast. And this is a very sentimental episode to me because I feel Ricky's pain, man. Because when I had let go of Felicia, a lot of my ex girlfriends were calling back. And the creeps from this book and this episode look a lot better than a lot of them did. Can I get an amen, brothers? Anyway, so I'm very excited. Obviously, alien stories, aliens in disguise. And these are pretty fun stories. So this is actually a good comparison, and it's quite enjoyable. And again, a lot of you guys have been recommending it because there's such an obvious parallel between the two stories. So hope you guys are looking forward to it.
Awesome. Micah, how are you doing tonight?
Doing great. Really excited to do this one. This is one of my favorite Goosebumps books and one of my favorite Haunting Hour episodes combined into one. So always hyped for it. This is definitely a very close tie for me.
Okay. Okay. It's gonna be interesting seeing all over the board takes I feel this episode's gonna have. But as usual, Spongy 444, who is also a fellow panelist who's not really on screen, will be providing text contribution to the discussion and our verdicts and all of that. So if you want to check out more stuff from Spongy, you can look at the comment section and the description down below and check his stuff out on his Twitter, his blog, and his DeviantArt page and all that. I'll have all that mentioned there. So we got four things to cover, so we might as well get right into it. So, Calling All Creeps is widely known as one of the later original 62 classic books. And how divisive books 40 through 62 can be at times, Calling All Creeps seems to be one that live rent free in fans' heads. It's always one that when people see it talked about, they love talking about it. And the story follows an iconic Goosebumps protagonist, Ricky. And Ricky, he is a nerdy archetype that you'll find in Goosebumps, but he has this urge to make a name for himself and wants to, put himself out there. But the problem is the world keeps kicking him down. He has these bullies that haze him around his locker and in the lunchroom. He has this big, capital letter B person above him in his school paper that constantly shoots his stories down and makes him look like basically a dumbass in front of everyone, or ridicules him by not including his stuff in the school newspaper. He has a pretty crappy school life, and his social life has zero capital going for it. Well, there's this new girl that comes to school, and when he gets involved with her, this is around this time where there's this scuffle going on between him and this Major B at his school newspaper, and he wants revenge on her not putting his story in the paper. So he decides to go break into the school one night and sabotage the headline of the paper and put her phone number in it and leave a message inviting creeps to call her, let's just say. And there's what I think it's like 1888 calling all creeps or whatever it is. I forget what it's exactly called in the book, but if you read it, you'll probably know what I'm referring to here. Well, anyways, after Ricky tries to sabotage the computer and narrowly gets found out by the girl, the next day he notices that his life has been turned upside down, essentially, because he realizes that not only did his plan backfire, but later on that night in his home, he's starting to get phone calls around midnight. And these phone calls are asking when they're going to meet up. Like, we're fellow creeps, when we're going to meet up. And he's like, okay. And once he learns the truth behind that, and why he's getting called, he feels defeated. But also, I guess in a weird twist of fate, certain people that we've already known in the story make their presence known to Ricky, that they are creeps. And by creeps, I mean an alien species. And they have decided that Ricky is their leader that they've been searching for. And Ricky is now tasked to help them sabotage the school so the creeps can take over humanity. And Ricky spends the rest of the story going back and forth on the morality of that. And then by the end of the story, Ricky makes a very harrowing and ultimate, you know, ethic defining decision that lives rent free in Goosebumps' fans' heads and has been for years. I don't want to spoil the twist if you haven't seen it before, but it's pretty shocking. And it involves his perspective on humanity by the end of the story and how he feels moving forward with that. So I'm going to say this off the bat. I guess the one thing that Calling All Creeps is known for is the twist and Ricky. Ricky is easily one of the best written Goosebumps protagonists of all time. His monologue is incredible in the story. He has some great introspective. He's very honest with the reader when he's going through the tribulations of the story. He makes it known of how the situation feels weird. He also lays out his insecurities about it at the same time. But then you also see him wanting to persevere through that and try to come up with a solution, because at the end of the day, even though people don't like him and even though that he feels like an outcast, he still feels compelled to save them for majority of the story. So that's something to really latch on to, and that speaks a lot about what it means to be a good person. You can be crapped on your whole life, you could be, kicked down every time you try to get back up, but if you try to persevere, at the end of the day, that's all that matters. And that's a good message that the story has. But getting back to the twist, Ricky's ultimate decision makes you really think about how people are treated and what that drives people to do. And a lot of people seem to make this allegory about this book, and I totally see the connection people make with this to like a real life docudrama of a school shooter or something like that. I know we're getting very heavy with this subject matter. Sorry if this, makes you feel a certain way. But you can see those parallels here with Ricky and the conclusion he comes to. It makes you think about stuff like that. And for that, I think this book has a lot more substance going for it than your average Goosebumps tale. And while, we can look at it from this point of view, not a lot happens in terms of story, but there's fun twists and turns involving Ricky's new friend Iris. There's fun with these monster kids known as the Creeps. And, this is a story that I think lives on in Goosebumps and is one of the books that provides legitimacy for the series. Goosebumps is known for basically turn your brain off, just entertainment, right? You go in to have fun and nothing else. That's all you really need to expect. But occasionally you get these books that kind of defy that and go above and beyond to have something more substantial for the reader. And for that, I hold this book at a high regard, and I give this an A tier all day in the play. I think I gave it like a 4.7 out of 5 stars or something like that in my review, or 4.6. And I think it's a solid book all the way through. Given some flaws, though, there are some aspects that I think are kind of slow, and there are some things in the plot that I don't really feel compelled to talk about right now. If you want to hear my actual thoughts, you can watch my review on it. But yeah, held back by a few things, but I love this book. I'll pass it on to whoever else wants to take it next.
Mike, you want to do it or should I?
I can go. So yeah, for me, this, as I mentioned in the beginning, this is one of my favorite books of all time. Honestly, it may be in my top 10. I don't know yet, but it's still kind of have to gauge, as I keep reading through the rest of the series, since there's still a lot of books I haven't read yet, and some of them are those like fan favorite books. So, but as of right now, it would be in my top 10. And I just think this book is just a very well done book. Ricky is a very, very sympathetic character, especially to me, because in my like elementary, middle, and even early high school years, I was severely bullied. So, I have that kind of emotional connection to Ricky and his, his dilemma and the things he goes through. And while I never made as drastic of a decision as Ricky does at the end of the book, you know, you can still relate to some of the stuff you've went through if you have, gone through bullying in your youth, I think it's just he's one of the, again, more relatable protagonists, like a Carly Beth and those kind of characters. So I really love him. I think all of the creeps are very fun. They're easily some of my favorite, like lesser popular villains. I think they're very underrated in my opinion, in terms of their whole plan to like basically take over the school and eventually the world, and how they plan to do it. I think it's a very fun way of doing like an alien invasion kind of storyline. I think that, the twist of the identities of the creeps, I think, is also a kind of fun reveal, and kind of taking the idea of characters who played a somewhat big part in Ricky's troubles at school, and suddenly having them basically be worshiping Ricky, basically, is just really funny, especially like when it first kind of starts happening, where you see like hints of them suddenly just being nice to Ricky for no reason. Like, you just wonder what's going on and all that. I love that. You know, Obviously the twist is easily one of the best twists in Goosebumps, in my opinion. It comes out of left field. Like, if you never heard of this story before, you never have read the book, and you go into it completely blind, that is a very shocking reveal. And it's pretty like impressive that Stein was willing to go there, because while it's not like anybody dies necessarily, it's just one of those decisions that a character makes where it almost turns the protagonist into a villain by the end of it. And as Completion has said, it's a great allegory for how sometimes extreme bullying can push people into this really dark place that maybe alters their lives altogether. And so I think that is just a really smart thing that Stein did. Again, Stein was willing to go that route with the book. And my opinion, this is a 10 out of 10 book. I love this book. So
Great thoughts, Micah. Beatty, you want to add to that and give your thoughts on the book?
Sure. So I guess in terms of the OG62, this is definitely one of my highest rated books that I've read so far. Probably put it right under things like The Haunted Mask and Welcome to Dead House, because the whole, I guess, plot of the story, the way Stein executes it, it just seems like one of those things that was destined for greatness, and it kind of turned out like that. When you look at like even something as simple as the title, iconic title, Calling All Creeps, you don't usually hear kids horror books like that. And when you hear the premise, the idea that a kid who gets viciously bullied can pull a prank as simply as trying to give like the wrong number and wrong advertisement regarding one of the people he dislikes, and then getting phone calls and these big reveals, that's a big thing. um, I have to say for sure that Ricky is definitely one of the best characters in Goosebumps, because there's like 40 pages just dedicated to the kind of stuff that Ricky deals with. You see very much in depth how he's sort of at the bottom of the food chain and how everybody picks on him. He has flat out mean bullies. He has people who basically kind of C block him from getting into the clubs that he wants to do, demote him. So there's like multiple layers of bullying. And you also have this new girl that is basically like his best friend and potentially a love interest, who's openly seeing him get treated like trash. And a lot of people say that because it's Goosebumps, it's obviously over the top bullying. This is not really the level that goes to in real life. But although I've never been viciously bullied, I have seen people viciously bullied to levels like these with certain people. Even one of the biggest things that sticks out to me, I remember I was in high school and this one girl had got viciously bullied for something that people thought she did, and it was revealed that she didn't do it. She wasn't what people thought, and then people had just turned the blame and said, you look like the type of person to do it. So there are people out there like that who just viciously bully certain people because they feel like they can get away with it. Ricky deals with that. And one of the best things that I think even Micah brought up is just the fact of how the villains actually play into the story. The fact that Stein specifically wrote that these bullies are always confronting Ricky and always trying to dogpile him and trash him. And then all of a sudden now they're confronting him to worship him, to praise him, to treat him like he's number one. It just throws you in a complete 180, and it kind of juxtaposes the story really hard. And then you find out that, oh, shoot, Ricky's getting what he wants, but it comes at a huge cost. That's really deep. And I love the story for that. And the ending, we all know what's up with the ending. The ending, the fact that, the protagonist does turn into the villain, that's a big thing because you see that Ricky has a very high breaking point. The kid never folds. He never folds. He keeps going in. And for how many years has he not folded until like the very last moment where it's kind of like a bomb defusal situation? And he's like, nah, I'm just going to let the bomb go off because at this point, the people aren't worth saving. So, yeah, amazing story. Probably give it a 9.6 out of 10. And depending on when I finish Goosebumps, I might raise it to even a higher score, maybe even a perfect. So this is definitely an S tier book. All of you guys should read it if you haven't. But considering how iconic it is, I'm sure you guys know the deal with it.
Yeah, great points, y'all. And I think what we all kind of got at before we get into Spongy's thoughts, and I think Spongy will probably echo this too, is the fact that the ending sends home Ricky's journey that we got to see him go through. There's a lot of things that happen off page beforehand. This book definitely deals with pre-existing circumstances, and it dabbles into the history of the mind of Ricky a little bit, and we get to see a perception of his surroundings as this has always been going on for me, and it very immediately plugs you into Ricky's character. So that twist at the end throws you for a loop because you don't necessarily want Ricky to do it, but you totally understand why, and it makes you think if you were Ricky in that situation and never got better, would you do the same thing he did? And that's why this book means so much to people because it sticks with you. It makes you think, and when books can make you think, that's a good piece of literature. That's and this is why I think Calling All Creeps has been loved for as long as it has. It's great points, guys. Let's get into Spongy's thoughts and then we'll get into the episode.
All right, let's see what Spongy has to say about the book. Okay, so here's Spongy's thoughts about the Calling All Creeps book. So he says this is a pretty strong book. For one, I do like the unique situation where Ricky has to pretend he's on the enemy's side as he tries to find a way to stop him. It serves a different dynamic that was fun to see, as the creeps serve as solid villains. There's a bunch of little charming things like Ricky's bond with Iris, but yeah, what brings it all is the ending and the overall negative situation. Others have gone more into it, but we see early on the sketchy places Ricky goes to for revenge and how it ends up blowing up in his face. Um, what he goes through is bad, and he has problems dealing with it. This all leads to the ending where he's basically fed up with it and gives up on humanity to get his revenge. And the way it's written makes it interesting and oddly satisfying. It's a more layered story that doesn't have a big moral per se, but it just presents these things in a solid way that you can have fun thinking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And I
great
think
points.
I think
Yeah.
that is also like a thing that I guess like all horror fans kind of have in mind too. That it's like whenever we watch horror movies or we read horror books, it's always the sympathetic protagonist, the one that's like, trying to be the moral figure always. But there's always that piece of our mind that's just like, this is a horror piece of the literature. So why don't they just like one day just snap? And I know people have those thoughts where it's just like, you know what? Why do we always need to be the good people in the situation? Why not be the bad? Well, here the trigger is pulled. The thing actually does happen. And then when it did happen in Goosebumps, people remembered it so much because the readers are basically in a situation where they're like, what just happened? Usually this character never does what we think that they should do. They actually did it. So he let his impulsive thoughts and intrusive thoughts take over. And by that point, it's too late.
I just thought about something that I don't think people have connected to, but I think what makes Ricky kind of in the same boat for like a Craig Morgenstern from Are You Terrified Yet for me is the fact that he's the Charlie Brown of Goosebumps. Like Ricky might as well be Charlie Brown. He's always having the football pulled from under him. He can never get his way. And what do we do, especially in America? We always glorify the underdog. We want the underdog to succeed, but most of the time they never do. And when they do, it's always the most epic thing ever. In Goosebumps, the underdog finally got the last laugh. I think Spongy's on the point. he's hell bent on revenge almost the entire book. He really wants to get back at these people, but then it becomes a point of the story where it's not about that anymore. But then at the very end, he kind of snaps back into it, and he's like, "Wait, this is my ultimate revenge." Haha. He gets the last laugh, and we see the underdog win. Maybe in a messed up way, maybe not in the most heartfelt way that it could have been, like Are You Terrified Yet, where it's almost equally as satisfying, but for completely different reasons, and how that story's structured. But you can totally see this at work that I think Stein, when he wants to, if he's writing an underdog protagonist, they're more than likely going to be the most fan revered ones. So that's great thoughts on that book. I think Calling All Creeps is pretty much unanimously across the board loved by us. So let's move on to the episode and our thoughts on that. An adaptation of an iconic book. To give you some sort of backstory before I pass it on to whoever wants to take it over, Calling All Creeps was a season 2 episode that came out of the 90s show. Not a lot of people know this aspect about it, though. This episode was made in advance to the book coming out. So the showrunners only had a soft rubric of the story, not the finalized version. And I think that might play a role in how it ended up being. But we'll get into that shortly. Whoever wants to take it over, let's talk about Calling All Creeps' episode.
All right. So, Calling All Creeps' episode follows, I mean, it's a pretty similar plot to the book. You got Ricky, he's bullied by these kids in school, both by this girl named Tasha. And instead of 4 bullies like in the book, we whittle it down to 3, which is David, Brenda, and Wart. And basically, yeah, he's relentlessly bullied by these people. You open the episode with him basically having this narration, like third person narration, basically describing like what he's doing while he's sneaking up to the school. And he breaks in and basically sneaks into the computer lab, kind of like the scene that happens later on in the book. Then he kick off with him basically putting the message in the paper to call Natasha at this number. And when he's trying to escape after he hears Tasha and the teacher come back, there's like this, the classic Goosebumps TV show cut to commercial segment where he gets his sweater stuck in the window and he's trying to get out of it as the teacher and them walk in. But it's fine. He ends up escaping. But they notice that he left some muddy footprints in there because he stepped on a flower pot and stepped in the mud when he was trying to get into the window. And so Tasha notices this, but doesn't really say anything, even though she pretty much knows that Ricky was there. And the next day, there's a whole, also, like, I want to get into a little bit that we didn't really touch on in the book, but in the cafeteria, there is basically a food that nobody eats. It's different between the book and show. The book, it's macaroni. The show, it's this tuna surprise. That's basically something that nobody in the school eats. Ricky basically, like when he meets Iris at the cafeteria, he literally like gets rid of the tuna surprise because like no one eats it. But anyways, when he goes to school the next day, he's targeted by, Brenda, Wart, and David. And basically this is really kind of cringy, like very kids show bullying scene where they basically just force him to sing Mary Had a Little Lamb in front of the school. It's so dumb. But after this, Iris ends up coming up and she notices that Ricky is being basically is bullied by these people and offers to help him offers him to come help her with making some things for the school bake sale. And that night while Ricky is in bed, he starts getting these calls from people saying they're creeps, much like in the book. And the next day, while he is going to Iris's to help her with this bake sale, he is essentially kidnapped in the woods and thrown down into this like tree cavern thing. I don't know what it is, but and he's confronted by Brenda, David, and Wart, who are revealed to once again be the creeps in this horrible, horrible transformation effects that do not age well in the slightest. And you revealed to be the creeps. And the creeps in this episode look very different from how they're described in the book. And in my opinion, they look awful. The masks and stuff, like, it's not even like they did like prosthetics or anything. It's very clearly a mask they just pulled over the actors' heads and like didn't even try to like glue it on or anything like that. It looks really bad. There's moments like where you can see the neckline of the mask like coming out of their shirts, and like it does not look good and or convincing in the slightest. But Ricky's confronted by the creeps, and basically they think he is their leader. And while like this whole thing is going on, they start basically trying to force him to put these things called identity seeds into various food, like into the food at the school, because their plan is to turn everyone in the school into creeps. And so Ricky, not wanting that to happen, basically puts it in the tune of surprise without the creeps really knowing that's what he did. And so the next day, like there is kind of a funny scene there the next day where Ricky is basically standing at the end of the lunch line and like checking everybody's trays as they're passing by to make sure they're not getting the tuna surprise. And basically the creeps confront him later on, and he basically BS's his way out and tries to say like, I didn't know that's what I was putting it in, to try and, weasel his way out of getting in trouble with them. And eventually he is confronted by Iris, who basically overheard this whole conversation and pretends to basically be one of the creeps as well to help Ricky get out of this situation. And that's kind of leads into the ending that's very like the book with the bake sale. And it expands on the ending of the book a little bit by showing a little extra scene that the book doesn't describe. And that's basically where Calling All Creeps ends. The episode is very middle of the road, in my opinion. It's not bad, but it's not really good either. The acting overall is pretty on par with your standard Goosebumps acting. I like Ricky's actor overall. I think he does a solid job in the role. The episode definitely makes him much more wimpy and less relatable than the book is. And, I think he still does a good job, but it's just not as impactful as Ricky is in the book. Pretty much everybody else is pretty bad, especially Brenda, Wart, and David. Their acting is pretty abysmal. And Iris is really well acted. I think she also is the one who played Allison in the Cry of the Cat episodes. So I think she is pretty solid. As I mentioned in my recap, there are some really bad transformation effects that you see when the creeps transform, both in the first part of the episode where you first encounter the creeps, and then at another point, which I won't say when. But the 90s show for transformations usually looks really bad because it simply is like they give it the 90s show Animorphs treatment, where they basically just warp the actor's face into the shape of the other animal it is, and then or creature, and then it just crossfades into the monster costume. It looks really bad. And as I mentioned, the creep costumes look nothing like the book describes them. They're like these yellow, almost iguana looking creatures. And like they just look really off and weird. And just, again, the makeup effects, they pretty much had no budget for this episode. You can just tell, like, the masks, while they're well sculpted, they did not do any effort trying to blend it into the actor's face. So you can clearly tell there's like eye holes in the mask, and like as I mentioned, like the neckline coming out a lot of the times. The effects are not very convincing. It's very rushed and truncated from the book, and you just don't get a lot of time to really relate to Ricky's character and really, I don't know how to describe it. You don't really get an emotional tie to Ricky like you get in the book. But overall, I still think it's a fun episode. It's not one I don't recommend people skip necessarily. It's just very middling, in my opinion. I give it like a 6 out of 10. It's just okay.
Okay. I can see your point of view with a few things, but I'm gonna let BD chime in his thoughts before I get into mine.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, I know we've always ran into the whole thing where it's like, okay, they make this episode before the final book blueprint is there. They have less to work off of. But at the same time, I kind of gotten sick at this point of just hearing that of like, hey, we get this rough outline. This is going to be the product. Because at that point, why don't you just adapt books that are already out there? You have plenty of books that are already out there. They're full outlines. Why do you keep trying to make things that are still being finalized? And when you see the product here, it's like, with me personally, with the monster designs, I don't mind them, but they don't look like creeps. Like, if you were to show me these things, I'm gonna be like, that's not creeps, because creeps are purple lizards. They look like purple monitor lizards, just like Tim Jacobus's cover. You've been seeing the IDW comics. That's how they look. You look in the Goosebumps movie. Here, they just look like a completely different monster, to the point that they're even reusing that in the Shocker on Shock Street makeup effect BS. So that one is a big thing where it's like you wouldn't even recognize this as calling all creeps. The biggest strength with the book is the fact you get so much time dedicated to Ricky and fleshing out his character. Here, everything is just sped by and rushed. What takes like pretty much 40 pages in the book to establish in terms of Ricky's character, here you have like 7 minutes or less. And that is just way too fast. You're not going to get the time. And the only way that you could flesh out Ricky's character enough was it would need to be a two-parter, and you would need to genuinely work on the script, the dialogue, and the acting. Here, the dialogue kind of takes a back burner, which is strange to me because, again, the book is so character heavy. Yeah, the creeps exist, but it's not like a giant monster mash feature in the book. No, the book is strategic. The book is about character development. The book is about how characters interact with each other. So you can't just go 180 and try to make this whole flashy kind of thing. It's just not going to work. The one benefit I say this episode has is Iris. I think she's better in the episode than she is the book. In the book, she was more so to me like a plot device. Not saying that that's bad, but she's just sort of there to kind of motivate Ricky, to kind of put that pressure on him, like, I got this new friend and she's seeing me embarrassed all the time. Here she feels like her own character, and I appreciate that. I feel like that's cool to have, as Iris is a sort of figure that's really stepping in, really trying to be the mastermind behind saving the world, while Ricky's taking the glory. That's very also kind of heroic of her to do, to kind of help out Ricky and then be like, no, 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 you take the attention. I'll just do the shit behind the scenes, but you be the hero. So I enjoyed that. But other than that, yeah, episode super rushed. You could have made it a two-parter or just adapted something else. And please, for the love of God, if you ever in the future, like let's say Stein, for some reason, their stuff is getting adapted and Stein is like working on something, don't try to get your hands on what he's working on. Just work on whatever's already out there and make your own adaptation of it. So those are my thoughts. I'd give it like what I give it? I'd probably give it like a 7.6 out of 10. It's above average, pretty good. Is it fantastic or as hyped up as I think it should be in terms of how people rate it? No.
Yeah, I'm right on the money with you guys. I think calling all creeps this episode to me, it's a hollowed version. It's a hollowed version of a great book, and I've said this in the past, in I think a former discussion or maybe a review of Night of the Living Dummy 2, where I think what made that book work wasn't there in the episode. I feel the same about Creeps, but I think Creeps is a better episode than Dummy 2. Right? That's just my opinion. But I think what it does try to do, because it knows it doesn't have the book page to do it, they at least try to show you why Ricky is sympathetic. But at the process of doing that, they made Ricky less snarky and less witty than the book counterpart. To me, he had more of a backbone. The episode, he's just ultra pathetic, and I don't really buy his character. He feels too melodramatic and too wimpy. Like when the kid goes up right into his face and burps, he just goes, ugh, and does nothing. He doesn't do anything. He just sits there and takes it. I'm like, come on, this isn't Ricky. Who's buying that this is Ricky from the book? He feels like a downgrade to me. Um, the bully characters, they all suck as actors. I'm sorry, but they're not good. And the ADR they put on these characters with the creep makeup is embarrassing. And Micah has a point. The mask line shows up and all of that, but I ironically like the design of the creeps more than the book cover that Jacobus did. Now, there's a reason why there's only been one yellow creeps, because I think this was probably a product to them not knowing what color the creeps were at the point when they made the episode, so they just winged it and say, hey, what color would they be? But for fans, I could see when this episode came out around the time the book did, they would have been like, wait, this cover does not match this. And I think Calling All Creeps is probably one of those episodes that kids started to realize before Ultimate Goosebumps kicked on a season later that they're making books that are pretty much better than the episodes in their perception, right? Like, what's the point of watching these episodes if I can just read the book, or vice versa? Maybe you're on the camp back in the day that you like episodes and watch them more than reading. It became a competition within itself, especially when they're trying to release them the same month and they're so different from each other. Like, what version do you like more? And that I don't think that really helped kids because it probably made them resent one more than the other often than not. And I think the TV show was probably the one they resented more. But I digress. Going into how the plot unfolds, I think BD hit the nail on the head, and Mike even touched on it. It just feels like they're rushing through plot points of the book, and while it's truncating it, and while the pace is fine, you don't feel that connection with Ricky. You're missing that aspect to it, and his whole motive for wanting to save everybody, it doesn't really feel earnest. In the book, you kind of understood why, because Ricky's honest, and he's like, look, these people don't like me, but I can't do this to them. I'm a good person, blah, blah, blah. You don't really feel that in the episode. You're like, wait, why does this version of Ricky, who gets burped in his face and he just sits there and takes it, why is he going above and beyond to try to save these people? You just don't get that connection. And I'm going to say this. Nobody brought it up, and I guess I'll be the person to do it. We've talked about some dumb moments in some kids' horror episodes, okay? We've talked about the ghost lipstick from The Secret Admirer. We talked about the killer mustard gas from Mascot, Random. Let me tell you, the end note of this episode makes 0.000 okay? Let me run it down. I guess I have to get into spoilers here. So, these kids in the episode, the bullies, they go back and forth whether they actually believe Ricky is one of them, but Iris being in the equation convinces them that Ricky is one of them. And they go into this bake sale, and they're now tasked to give away these creep seed cookies, which is fine. That's the book. But what the episode does is so dumb. Ricky's on stage. He's announcing to everybody that eat the cookies, right? What does Wart do? He hands him a cookie to eat. How does Wart know that Ricky is not a creep? And why is Ricky getting a cookie if we're made to believe that he was believed to be a creep by these guys? It feels so forced just to have the end note be that he's transforming into one himself. It's so dumb, I have no words. All you needed to do to fix that is show Ricky sneaking off and eating a cookie before he gets on stage, and then it makes him turn. And he didn't tell Iris until that point. He's like, well, it's too late. I am one now. I think that would have been a fun twist on it, my take, but that scene was really dumb. One of the dumbest things I've seen in these episodes. Other than that, yeah, this episode just feels like a downgrade. You know what I mean? It doesn't capture what the book was all that well. It has the skeleton of it, just not everything else that surrounds the skeleton. The muscle, the tendon, the complexion, all of that. It's missing it. And yeah, it's about an average episode. Maybe a slight pushing above average. I'd probably give it like a 7.8 out of 10. Pushing an 8 out of 10. It's just missing that emphasis on being in that realm for me. And I think what's missing is that connection to Ricky that I wanted to be there that I just didn't feel. So that's my thoughts. If anybody else wants to add on, feel free. If not, we'll get into Spongy's thoughts on the episode and then decide who the winner is to face off against Alien Candy.
Spongy actually did not write down episode thoughts for this one, so I guess we could just continue. But I was going to say that I did not put the connection together that he had handed him a cookie, which meant that he knew that Blood was not a creep. Because even though I didn't catch that, the one thing at the end of the episode that did click with my mind when I was watching is there's a point where he's talking to Iris and he basically has the cookie and he's like, hey, if you can't beat him, join him. And in my head, I'm like, you realize that they're next to you, right? So you imagine that, like, oh, and even the fireworks are great. Imagine that they were. Imagine I'm next to you, and I'm assuming that you are a creep, you are a commander, and then you go to like this random person and just go, "Oh yeah, if we can't defeat these guys, let's join them." I'm right next to you, bro. Are you just snitching at last second? You just don't care at this point. You're just snitching that you planned on defeating him. And yeah, that didn't click with me. He gave him a cookie. So how do you know he's not a creep? Why do you need it? You guys didn't eat cookies. You guys just transform out of nowhere. So that's a good point. I won't lie. I didn't catch that, but yeah, that is for sure a plot hole.
Yeah, and it makes you think like if they knew all along, then why didn't they just take care of him to begin with?
Yeah, it's like it's weird too because like the difference is like because in the book, in the ending, he does also eat a cookie, but the difference is in the book he takes a cookie himself. When none of the Ward or none of them hands him a cookie, he willingly takes the cookie.
Yeah.
The Cookie Gate, Calling All Creeps episode. Don't believe us? Go watch the episode, and you cannot unsee that final note because we mentioned it too. You're welcome.
It's also
All right,
kind of
since
ironic. It's also just kind of ironic when you like watch the episode, like you read the book, like I did today. Like in the book, you kind of see that his like character development changes. Like he becomes like all of a sudden like very bravado, and he's like, you know what, eat it. Yeah, this is what I wanted. Things are gonna change. Meanwhile, in the episode, he's like, actually, don't eat the cookies. And then even at the end, he's like whimpering. He looks like he's about to cry. So it's like he doesn't even get that vote of confidence. It's almost like he was held at gunpoint and had to say like, "Oh yeah, eat the cookie." Like some of the decisions they made, man. He didn't have that aura. He didn't have that change at the end. He's still the same old wimpy Ricky, and it's almost like the producer is just like, "Yo, just tell him to eat the cookie," and then he says it.
all right, well, since Spongy didn't put his thoughts apparently, then I guess we have picked Calling All Creeps' book to be the face or offer against Alien Candy. Now, Alien Candy, like I mentioned before, is a short story from R.L. Stein's short story collection, I think from 1999, called The Nightmare Hour. And this has been the major book that we've been pulling comparisons from when we do Haunting Hour. And since we've read a few, some of these could be rereads for some of us. It was my first time reading it this time, but it's not my turn to share what it's about. So, whoever wants to take it over, let's talk about Alien Candy's short story.
Yeah, I'll take it. So, Alien Candy's short story is definitely, I think it's one of the shortest stories in Nightmare Hour, along with like the dead body, I think. And basically, the short story is about this kid named Walter, who is basically starting this alien. He's the leader of this aliens enthusiast club that basically is held at this in the attic of this kid named Greg's house. And Greg, along with three other kids, Bonnie, Evan, and I can't remember the other girl's name, but basically these four kids, two boys, two girls, are big alien enthusiasts, and so is Walter. And he's basically trying to fit into the shoes of being this leader of this club. He's trying to organize things and, go over itineraries and, do the necessary stuff that you should do in a club meeting. But the other kids are very much distracted. They're fighting with each other, talking about Star Trek or whatever they're doing. And they're just not really paying attention to Walter. And eventually Greg goes downstairs because they're all complaining that they're hungry and brings up this candy that he calls alien candy and basically passes it out to everybody and they all eat it. And like it's kind of described to be like almost like fudge in a lot of ways. And after they eat it, I'm going to kind of get into spoilers because it's kind of a big part of the story you kind of need to get into. But after they eat it, Walter starts noticing that all of the other kids start to turn into aliens in these really like wild, almost not really body horror, but like these really like over the top transformations and like have these really bizarre looking alien designs. And Walter starts freaking out, like thinking, oh, this candy is turning everyone into aliens. And he starts thinking, he's going to turn into an alien. And there's a big reveal that the reason that these aliens are basically bringing these leaders is not because they're trying to turn them into aliens, but they are basically bringing these people in to lure them and eat them. And the episode, I mean, the short story ends in a very dark note with them all basically pouncing on Walter and eating him. And that's basically how the short story is. It's very short, very simple to the point. And it's an all right short story. I think it's a fun one. It's definitely the least scary of the Nightmare Hour book or short stories, but it has some fun elements. I think the alien designs that they describe are they're goofy, but I think they work very well and they kind of feel very otherworldly and bizarre. And it describes the transformations very well, I think. I think that the ending, again, as I mentioned, is very dark, and I kind of like darker endings and horror short stories like that. But overall, again, it's very simple. There's not much to it. So I think it's probably a solid, like, 6 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, I can see that grade because I'm not too far off that from a short story grade myself. Here, I guess I'll go into my thoughts before I pass it over to BD about this one. This was a first time read for me. I read this for the podcast, and for it being so short, I can't be too harsh on it, but I kind of found myself shrugging my shoulders with it. I thought the ending was fun. I like the twist where the candy that gets brought up is implied to be some sort of thing that turns these kids into their natural form, I guess. While vague and unexplicit as that can be, other than that, the rest of the story was just kind of whatever, kind of meh. It's just them meeting around in a circle and the kids are yapping, having a yap fest, and we see Walt, the main character, almost have a brain aneurysm. And you're like, okay, well, where's the story going to go? And it randomly detours into them getting candy and it ends. So, what I think would have made this story so much better is if Stein pulled out what he is known for sometimes, and he's really good at doing this. Pull out the whole puff puff pass drug allegory with this. Make this a story about being peer pressured into doing alien candy with these kids. Walt joins this alien club and they're all talking about aliens and they're like, hey, we got this alien candy that's rumored to be uh, actual extraterrestrial candy. Walt, you got to eat some with us. And then Walt notices as his friends are eating the candy, they start changing and they're not themselves anymore. You can see that symmetry there. And Walt is like, okay, I'm not taking it because you guys have taken it and have changed. And then they're like, no, you need to eat it. And then they force him to eat it. And then for him, it could be a recontextualization that when he eats the candy, it's kind of like cooking him alive and then they eat him, you know. But hey, food for thought. The story it didn't, the beginning and the middle didn't feel like it matched the ending to me. Like the ending is cool, but the rest needed some work. Um, could have been a full book idea if you wanted to. I don't know if this was a reject for the Nightmare Room that he possibly had lying around, or maybe made before he made the Nightmare Room series. Could have been intriguing to see it there, but yeah, I'd probably give this story on a short story basis probably like a 3 out of 5. It's decent, well on the lighter side for me. And I'll pass it over to BD. What's your thoughts on the Alien Candy short story?
Yeah, this is one that because I've read it twice, and I've read it, and because it's so short, it's read it twice. I don't want to read it like a third time because I know what happens in the story. But it was one of those things that when I had first initially read it, I was like, wow, that was drastically different to the episode. I was half expecting there to be more similarities to the episode, but it's its own thing. It has some positives in it to where it's not like fully boring. I like the Star Trek references. I also like how it's kind of nonchalantly revealed at the end of the story that they were getting sick of listening to him yap. And they eventually got to the point where, like the whole story, they're not listening to him. They're basically just like flat out ignoring him. And then it just turns into that meme where it's like, why is the food talking so much? And then eventually they're just like, yeah, you know what? We're done. We're done listening to you. The way I'd initially interpreted that candy scene was I kind of thought of it as like a party trick play where like they knew that by eating this candy they would transform and he won't. So maybe they were kind of relying on him to think of it as a fluke. But before we started the podcast, we also kind of threw out the idea maybe it's like an initiation process. Gave him the candy, see if he'd transform. He didn't. You're not worthy, so we're just gonna make a meal out of you. And that's why they invite the next person over so quickly because there is a next person who comes after, and you kind of figure out what they're sort of running in terms of a scheme. I'd give it 6 out of 10. Probably the best part is again the ending, because for some reason they decided to make the aliens look a lot like Muppets and Sesame Street characters. It's the idea of these ridiculous looking aliens doing something so horrific to a kid just like that nonchalantly. It does pack a punch, but it relies so hard on that punch, and the punch literally comes out of nowhere. So yeah, not much to say with that one.
Mm-hmm. Wow, we all gave it the same exact score. That's rare. Let's hear Spongy's thoughts on it, because I'm curious what he thinks about this short story after reading it.
All right, let's see. All right, so for Alien Candy's short story, it seems it's unanimous. It's too light to have much to offer. The concept is a neat one, but it jumps to the twist too early, so there's not really much to say. There's decent foreshadowing, but doesn't matter when it's pretty obvious what's going on. The very ending was amusing, but otherwise it's just there. It feels like filler, basically. If this were like a weenie story or something, I'd like it a bit more, but in a collection, like Nightmare Hour as a book, it's not as strong as Haunting Hour, but the stories in Haunting Hour are more meaty and memorable in this one. And he says even for Nightmare Hour, it's not much, which I agree. Especially if you compare let alone you compare the stories in Nightmare Hour. This is a very just not meaty one, and then compared to Haunting Hour, it's a blowout. So yeah.
Yeah, so I think we're all in agreement that this one is just kind of middle of the road and nothing really too remarkable. Which brings us to the episode, and this is a running gag with these adaptations in Haunting Hour, where basically they either take the concept and semi faithfully adapt it in some cases, or just take the short story and insert it into the episode, and then form majority of this what they created around maybe that short story in a specific scene. This is one where they essentially just took the character names and the concept of an alien club and then just basically ran with it and made their own new idea with it. So, BD, since you haven't, gone over the synopsis, why don't you tell us about Alien Candy's episode?
And I'm excited for this one because this is probably, I would probably say this is probably one of the most fun episodes in Haunting Hour outside of something like Creature Feature. Just really, really zany. And I got to give a shout out because obviously we got some more Diary of the Wimpy Kid action going on. Fragley. And Fragley, you are no longer the most annoying character. No, no, no. You are a good character in this one. So shout out to you. Got your redemption. Good to see it. For those of you who don't know, the Haunting Hour usually does feature a lot of Diary of the Wimpy Kid characters. If you watch the Mummy episode, you watch Catching Cold, you watch the cast, you'll see them keep reappearing. So this episode basically opens up with Waltz and Tim. Waltz and Tim are kind of like the two nerds in the school. You tell by their banter that they're not very popular. They're often isolated at a table, talking about like their Halloween costumes, their alien obsessions. If y'all say Tim looks like me, I'm gonna knock y'all out. Don't think you're safe behind the camera. We do not look alike, bro. He looks like a bootleg Ravi from Jesse. And I even remembered him as the actor as Ravi. And then I saw the actor and I'm like, no, that's not Ravi. So obviously they love aliens. Waltz is more so into aliens. He has like books that have conspiracy theories about government projects. He's really, really deep in. And you see that they're getting bullied by these two older kids who coincidentally look like older versions of Waltz and Tim because they just picked a bigger Indian dude and a bigger white dude with long hair. So those kids are picking on him, making fun of their hobby. They smack away the alien book. Waltz gets pushed, and Waltz runs into the cafeteria lady's food in her tray. So basically, him and the bully end up getting called to the back to help the cafeteria lady clean up her stuff. And while that happens, the book is sent flying, and it basically lands into the hands of these two very quiet kids. And these are very mysterious kids. You get a sort of ominous vibe about them, and you get introduced to them as Bonnie and Greg. And while I don't know much about Bonnie's actress, I got to give a shout out to Greg's actor because Greg's actor is Matthew Knight. And those of you who don't know, Matthew Knight plays the main protagonist in My Babysitter's a Vampire, which is one of the greatest Disney sitcoms of all time. Watched the movie when it came out, watched the TV show when it came out. So seeing him in this one was very, very cool. Bonnie and Greg essentially get very interested into Waltz. They say that he's the perfect specimen, the ideal individual to invite into their club. And then you see them approach Waltz after a little bit and basically tell him, like, hey, you're into aliens. We can tell by this book you're having. We ourselves are very much into aliens. And when they drag him to this back room area, they start showing all these weird objects, these weird memorabilia, this different information they've collected. And you find out that there is a government project called Operation Blue Bridge, which basically denounces and kind of says that human contact with alien life must be regulated. It can't be promoted. It can't be done. But then these kids claim that they have contacted aliens and that the technology and gadgets that they have are actually alien in nature. Main one being this blue rock, which is said to be basically like bioelectric, basically living electronics. And that's when the more and more Walt sees, the more and more he starts to believe, okay, these kids might actually be in contact with aliens. And then they give him these blue jelly beans to basically eat. And they say that these are supplements that'll help you basically connect into telepathy with extraterrestrial life. You could have a once in a lifetime opportunity communicating with aliens if you eat it. And I'm not going to lie to you, they gave that man fent. I saw that. I'm like, man, that's fentanyl. It straight up looked like that. Good. Hooking that man on drugs early on. And he starts eating them. He keeps eating them, thinking that it's got brain power. It's going to help him out. And then one night, one very creepy night as he's sleeping, he wakes up and Bonnie and Greg are in his room. And he gets really freaked out. He's like, how did you guys get in my room? And before he can even react properly, they put that glowing bioelectronic rock and his body paralyzes and he can't move. And that's when you find out Bonnie and Greg weren't picking him for a club. The reason why they were telling him to be so secretive about this club joining is because they were preparing a meal and that those basically jelly beans were to clean out his body of any potential earthly parasites and viruses to make him safe to eat. And then you get this very disturbing scene, which may or may not involve a toe. And let's just say toe gotta go. That's all I'm gonna say. The toe gotta go, and it's horrific. It's horrific. And you get this big revelation then, which is so stupid, which is that he had dyed his hair as part of his Halloween costume. So his hair is darker. And then in their language, which is like glorp, gorb, whatever, they're basically like, oh, he's a redhead? Oh, we're allergic to redheads. We can't eat redheads. That is some how to kill a monster, I'm allergic to humans type of reveal. I heard that. I was like, are you kidding me, bro? This is actually, I forgot that was a plot point. And I used to watch this show weekly as a kid, and I forgot that was a plot point. So obviously, they then leave Waltz alone and then decide we're going to go target Tim. Now it's up to Waltz to basically save his best friend, try to figure out the situation, because he realizes that I wasn't dreaming. It's all real, because he has a scene in the locker room where he's missing his toe. And he's like, this stuff actually happened to me, and I need to save the world right now, because if not, things are going to be too late for my friend and potentially other people. That is a story. This is easily one of the most wild episodes in The Haunting Hour. You got like creature feature, poof de fromage, mascot, and this. This episode feels a lot like a Goosebumps story. I had said it in my main review for it, but this definitely feels like a story that Stein would write and create as a book. I could easily imagine this thing turned into a book. And it is funny how it does have parallels to Calling All Creeps, the idea of an alien invasion being posed as a sort of secretive society kind of thing. They don't want people to know until it's too late, except while Calling All Creeps was trying to go on a more so kind of kinship and taking over route. No, here they're trying to take advantage of you. They're trying to prey upon people. It's a lot more dark, more gruesome than Calling All Creeps had gone. Well, minus that squirrel scene in Calling All Creeps. And here, there's actually some quite scary scenes. Outside of the toe scene, there's a scene involving a kitchen, which if you've seen Jurassic Park with the raptors in the kitchen, that's essentially what it is, except with aliens. The alien designs in this episode have been critiqued. People have said they look kind of basic, but I'm not going to lie to you. the way that their eyes move, the way they have piranha teeth, the way that they sort of move around. I have always found them creepy. As a kid, I found them more creepy, but even now, I think that they are sort of weird. They are sort of freaky. Maybe not necessarily terrifying, but they'll leave you kind of uncomfortable when you see them communicating with each other and doing stuff. So there are positives. Now, the weaknesses of the episode, stories all over the place. I'm not gonna lie to you. You jump around between plot points all over the place. There's even some filler scenes like the bullies throwing them in a dumpster, which you know is just a stall time. It's like no real purpose. And the acting. Walt is a good actor. Bonnie and Greg are kind of all right, but there was some bad acting, like Tim. I'm sorry, Tim. You're a fellow Indian brother. Your acting sucks, my boy. Got to go take some classes and then come back. So acting is not all there. Plot points are kind of messy. It doesn't make the most sense. And the biggest plot hole that I called out in this episode that still stands out to me as an adult, you expect me to believe that Waltz had seen two high school kids saying, hey, you know that top secret project Blue Bridge the government's been hiding alien contact? Oh, yes, us 15-year-old kids have breached government capabilities. We have acquired technology that even the government does not have, and we're doing it under their nose. And he doesn't raise any red flags, my boy. They said you had high IQ. That was cap. You stupid as hell, boy. Because if I would have seen 15-year-olds be like, hey, you see this bioelectronic? Hey, the government don't got this. I got this. I'd be like, bro, you got that at a Toys R Us. You got that at a Dollar Tree, my boy. I seen that. It's a garden ornament. Don't try to trick me with that. So easily, that's a big plot point. You're gonna look and be like, there's no way this kid's falling for it. But if you put disbelief, I think you'll have a fun time. And a hot take, it gets an 8 out of 10. It's better than Calling All Creeps episode. Because to me, it's more fun, better executed, more creepy, more invest worthy. And honestly, I could have seen a sequel. And that ending is nasty. It's disgusting. It's gross. It's nasty. And I liked it. 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I like the points that you brought up, BD, especially the idea of it having a sequel. I've always thought in the back of my mind, like, of course, Mascot I thought needed a sequel, but Alien Candy could have had one. Like, if they really wanted to, they could have easily built on with that. Maybe fast forwarded it, maybe like a month or two down the line, where there's friends of Greg and the girl. I forget the girl's name, but was it Kate?
Bonnie.
Bonnie. I don't know why I thought Kate. Greg and Bonnie's friends from the other worlds come down, and maybe you can do different aliens. Maybe you can build more into the mythology of why they're on Earth. I don't know. But I've always thought that Alien Candy would have been an easy one to do. But I guess I'll get into my thoughts about Alien Candy. When I first got into Haunting Hour, I think this was one of the earliest episodes I got to watch. And I can remember thinking in my head, I'm like, wow, they really tried to remake Calling All Creeps with this. I thought it was them trying to do that. And at the time, I was like, I think I really like this more than Calling All Creeps because I thought it was scarier. I valued that more in high school. I thought it was like the scene when he's in sleep paralysis, or I guess just in straight up paralysis. Him watching him getting his toe eaten was insane. I'm like, holy crap, they really went there. However, we've all said the great things. I think the acting's pretty good here from everyone, minus maybe Tim. Um, and I think the alien designs are creepy, and the climax is probably the best part of the whole episode, in my opinion. Next to the nightmare sequence, the climax is super fun. Even the resolution and the twist ending, which isn't really a twist, is kind of fun. When they realize what has happened, I thought that was kind of funny and amusing. There's a lot of high points to it, but when we're getting down to the typical elements of Haunting Hour, sadly, the pace can be all over the place. There's choppy transitions. As a matter of fact, this I actually went back and timed this for the podcast. So I just went back and skimmed over the episode real quick. Within a span of 3 minutes, this exactly happened in this way in the episode. So they went from discovering that he was a redhead. The next day at school, he went to the locker room and noticed that his toe was missing. His bully freaks out on him. And then he gets ambushed by Bonnie in the hallway. And then the bullies see that his friend is there. And once he notices that his friend is gone, literally right around after that 3 to 4 minute stretch, that's when immediately he goes to the room and they're already having Tim, on the table with the device in hand, about to eat him. I'm like, why are y'all rushing through this right now? Like, where is this coming from? And BD brought up there's a filler scene of him being shoved into a dumpster. Why is that there? Is that there to show that he's sympathetic? Is that there to kind of bridge the gap between Bonnie and Greg going up to meet him? You don't need that to be the meeting point. You don't need that stuff in there. And it feels like the stuff that I think people would have wanted to see, like maybe Tim gets confronted or maybe abducted. That would have been scary to see if they actually just abducted Tim because they were hungry at that point. Who knows? But that would have been scary. But yeah, stuff like that gets mulled over. But going back to the whole redhead reveal, where they're allergic to redheads, um, yeah, that's literally the most obvious plot convenience, plot armor I have ever seen in kids horror. Where they literally needed the main character to get plot armor so that way he can survive and save his friend, because that's the story they're trying to tell. They want him to be able to save Tim and give him an arc for some reason, but the redhead thing is stupid. It's so stupid. Oh, we're allergic to redheads. I get it's supposed to be comedic. Maybe it's a jab at R.L. Stine with his fetish with redheads in Goosebumps. I don't know. But yeah, very weird and bizarre. And even given the climax where the aliens are like pissed off and want to like get Tim and him, I'm like, what are you gonna do with him? You're just gonna kill him? And what are you gonna do with his body? You can't eat him. So what's the point of hurting him even more? I guess to silence him. But even then, the weakness to the aliens is also kind of silly at the same time. They have like slug-like skin. And if you know slugs, if you know anything about science, if you paid attention to biology, when you pour salt onto slug skin, they start to dissolve and their body gets contorted and it's really bad and it kills them. The aliens basically the same thing. Just put two and two together there. Yeah, very quick and rushed way to defeat the aliens, and yeah, it doesn't feel earned that they came to that point. They literally just find some salt shakers. So like, oh, let's throw it on them. Like, what made you come up with that? Like, because plot brought you there. Very rushed episode, and I think the pace hurts it the most. Other than that, I think the idea compared to the short story is way better. I like the inversion of calling all creeps here instead of it being an initiation or like them finding a leader and then worshiping said leader to do their people justice and create more of them. The aliens here, they have no real friendly motive with humanity. They want to use them as a, a dining experience. And that to me would have been fun to see possibly more of in the episode. I think it would have been cool if they built on the mystique of the backstory of the aliens a little bit better. Like, has this club been around since they've been in the school? Like, how many kids have gone and disappeared? This is another running gag and haunting hour. If kids go and disappear, the adults and everybody that works in these schools don't bat an eye to it, even though that there's obviously something going on with kids in this specific school. We've seen it in Mascot. The adults are apparently oblivious to people that go up and missing when they mess with the mascot, right? Here, there's a lot to be, said about Greg and Bonnie. How many other kids have they affected with this? It makes you think about that. They never really go into it, but maybe this was their first victim, or maybe this was their 10th victim. It doesn't go into that, and I wish it did. But if it had that, I possibly would have given it an A, but I gave it a low B, and I gave it about an 8.2 out of 10. Ramble aside, I'm going to pass it over to Micah. Micah, what's your thoughts on this episode?
So I really enjoy this episode. I think it's easily one of the most fun episodes of the Haunting Hour. I think that overall, it's a very solid entry into it. It definitely takes the short story and takes that basic concept of it and then just expands and improves on it in pretty much every way. I think that, as you guys have mentioned, the whole scene of Bonnie and Greg entering Walt's room at night and eating his toe off is like really creepy. and just very tense. Like that whole sequence, the instant you see Walt like wake up and him seeing Bonnie and Greg, having them acting really weird, and then just suddenly like paralyzing him. And then you kind of have this like, oh crap moments when Greg basically is like, the candidate is suitable for digestion. And you're just like, oh shoot. And then like the reveal of the aliens, I don't like the alien designs. Just they're too basic, and like there's the stereotypical little green men with the big heads and black eyes. I feel like it would have been a little more fun and interesting if they actually had unique designs that actually looked a little scarier, just in my opinion. But the reveal of them being allergic to redheads, while it's dumb, I almost view it more as like the writers like realizing how dark they made the scene up until then, and they're like, oh crap, this is a kids show, we need to throw something in here to make it a little bit more lighthearted. So they just like threw that joke in as a last minute thing to try and ease the blow. But yeah, that's how I kind of view that. But I think the climax is very fun, like a nice homage to Jurassic Park. You got, I think again, Walt, Grayson Russell as Walt is really good. And it's really weird rewatching this episode now because 2 summers ago, I actually met Grayson Russell at a Christian music concert of all things, because apparently nowadays he's a Christian music artist. So he was performing at this event that I went to. So that was wild seeing him there. But so yeah, it's just weird seeing him now, like going back and watching these episodes, and he was like a kid. But overall, I really like this episode. I gave it probably like an 8.5 out of 10. It's definitely one of the more solid episodes of Haunting Hour. There's definitely still some ones that are better, that are scarier, but in my opinion, this is a very fun and solid entry.
Another big thing too that I thought would be like a good avenue is like if they were to do a sequel, right? When I had heard Alien Candy, when like, because I used to watch the show weekly, so they used to like announce the title, show the trailer. I thought with the title Alien Candy, you would have expected like a Halloween story to definitely maybe take place. And they even mentioned Halloween in the beginning with like, that's sort of the big plot reveal, like the plot convenience about red hair was because he dressed up as like a Star Wars character or whatever. So I think that if they were to make a sequel, it could be probably kind of cool to see like maybe like Halloween, they're sneaking the alien candy inside of people's like, pillow sacks or whatever, walking around as their normal aliens, and people are like, "Oh, nice costume," and it's like, "Hey, you don't know." So I think that'd be cool too, because that also would be, they had done their own version of Calling All Creeps, so if they did their own version of like Attack of the Jack-o'-lantern from the alien type of side, that would be cool too, as like sequel bait.
That does sound fun. Like, to get revenge for Bonnie and Greg. Like maybe, I don't know, their other siblings or cousins or whatnot. They see Tim and Walt trick or treating, and they're like, you know what? We're gonna take care of their family, and maybe they like break into their house, take over their parents or whatnot, and they put alien candy in their candy bowl, and then they realize that their candy bowl has been tainted because they're the only ones that know what the alien candy looks like. They're like, holy crap! All these trick or treaters have gotten it, and then they discover that maybe some kids have already been picked off in the buffet, but they try to save some other ones. Like it's like them, the aliens are going trick or treating with kids. They have to clean them out first, but that's the fun of it, and that could be like the twist of it all. Like the aliens are dressed up in costumes, and maybe that could be a fun part of the episode where they're looking around all these trick or treaters, and they don't know who's a gray skin and who isn't because the transformation. So they have to look for telltale signs of, if they have the blue candy, then they're probably human. If not, they're probably aliens. So I think that would be a fun sequel idea. I think you're right on the money there. That would be awesome to see.
Yeah. Like another thing, like I remember when I first watched the episode, because like I read the short story first and then watched the episode. When I first watched the episode, I honestly thought before the reveal of like the alien candy being something that dilutes like the toxins and stuff, I honestly thought the alien candy was something that was like turning Walt into an alien when I first watched it, because like there was those scenes of him like getting really lightheaded and sweaty and all that stuff. So my first thought was like, this is like the starting stage of like him slowly transforming into an alien, and like they're plotting to take over, and like kind of like a Calling All Creeps thing where they're using the candy as like a way to transform kids into more aliens.
Yeah, thinking on that more, I don't really think I gave that enough credit. Like that twist deserves more credit than it gives than it's been given historically when people talk about this episode, because the writers and I guess even the director had a part in this. They played up the ambiguity of this candy very well up until that room scene. And that twist works because you don't necessarily see that actually being what's going on. And it's one of those genuine things where when the rug's pulled from under you, you're like, holy crap, that was good. Like, that was fun. Let's do it again. I want more of this. So yeah, retroactively, I did say in my review that I might bump this episode up by the time I finish Haunting Hour because of how fun it is and because of how fun the twist can be. I'll go ahead and say I'll probably go ahead and bump it up. Thinking on it, I'll probably bump it up to maybe an 8.4, maybe an 8.6. I think it's a little bit better than I was giving it credit because you made me think about the twist and how good that was. So yeah.
And also, BD, when you're mentioning like the whole like kind of plot hole, you're talking about like how Bonnie and Greg have access to this alien technology. That's like a secret government thing. The episode actually talks about it because the episode, like Bonnie explains when they're talking to Walt about this. Bonnie says that her dad was working for Project Blue Bridge, and that's how she has access to these things.
Okay, yeah, I missed that.
Yeah.
But even that, though, like
yeah, it's still dumb. But like,
even then, coincidentally, the one person who has a dad who works in the government is coincidentally at your house,
right,
coincidentally approaching you. So yeah, but that is better. That's better than the other one.
All right. So now that we've talked about Alien Candy's episode, I think we're all. Let's get into Spongy's thoughts because we've been rambling on, and then we'll get into the victor of Alien Candy, and then we'll decide who wins Calling All Creeps' book, or probably Alien Candy's episode if I had to guess.
Yeah.
All right. So let's see. So here he says Alien Candy's episode. Never been too high on this one. Granted, it does improve from the short story by expanding the plot. The angle it does with at first does work in expanding things, so adaptation wise, it's as good as it was going to be, I guess. On its own, there are some fun bits, and I like the dark humor of the ending, but the tone is a bit all over the place. For some reason, the show doesn't want to take aliens seriously, and while this isn't on the level of Pouf de Fromage, it leans a bit too goofy for me. Some got freaked out by the foot/toe acting thing, but like the idea was just silly to me, and the alien design didn't help. Oh my lord! Then you have the allergic to redhead thing, which feels like a classic Stein idea. At least there's a decent plot here, but it gets a bit too dumb at times and really holds together over. A lesser season 1 episode, sadly. I do love Fregley's in it, as is one of the kids from My Babysitter's a Vampire. Yeah, Matthew Knight's in it. And he did not do a direct comparison which one he liked, but based off what he said about each, I'd assume he would choose the Calling All Creeps book. But I do gotta disagree with you, Spongy. I don't know how you see that foot thing as goofy, man. That is a dark. I can only interpret that his toe getting eaten is dark.
That is dark for kids' horror standards. I mean, like
Mhm.
name other episodes where there's bodily harm actively done on screen to a kid.
And they doubled down on it too because the whole dream sequence, it was almost like, okay, was he hallucinating? Was he dreaming? Was he, whatever? But that scene, like even scarier than the dream, like the bedroom sequence, that locker room sequence where you see his toes actually missing, that is horrific, dude. The way he screams as well, the way the bully's like, oh my God, you four-toed freak. It's like, yo, like he lost a piece of himself. And he can't say anything. It's not like nobody would ever believe him. So, that's crazy.
Yeah, and even like the sound design in the bedroom scene as well is really creepy too. Like how you like when you don't actually see obviously his toe getting bitten off, but you hear like the teeth like crunching through the bone and stuff like that. And that's just I don't know. That honestly is more effective to me than actually seeing it happen because it leaves your mind to just kind of imagine what's going on.
And plus, they
And like
balance the goofy
you
because,
think about the fact that like well, like it's just a terrifying situation because Walt is paralyzed and he can't move. But I mean, he probably felt that his toe getting bitten off. I'm sure that didn't like numb any pain or anything like that. So
yeah. Plus, they balance the goofy. Like they throw in that creep show lighting, but then there's a dark scene, so it's like they do a good job, good balance.
So we have Alien Candy's episode basically winning out for Alien Candy. And to close off this podcast episode, because we don't have a discussion planned, let's go ahead and decide who the winner is. Now, I'm going to pass it to whoever wants to take it first. If you had to pick between Calling All Creeps' book and Alien Candy's episode, which one would you pick?
Mike, you want to go or should I go?
I can go. So for me, the winner is Calling All Creeps' book because, I mean, again, as I said, I give the book a 10 out of 10. It's one of my favorite Goosebumps books. You know, this giving Ricky such a relatable, like, you know, situation to be in. His monologue is great. And, you know, again, as someone who was bullied, I seriously relate to Ricky. And while Walt is also bullied in Alien Candy's episode, it's less extreme than the stuff Ricky goes through in Calling All Creeps. And I just think, you know, the whole story of Calling All Creeps and just the way it plays out, the way it ends, it's just very effective and well done. While Alien Candy, while it's still fun, lacks just some of that relatability with the character. It lacks just some of the, I don't know, just lacks some of the nuance and interest that Calling All Creeps has. So for me, Calling All Creeps wins out.
Okay. BD, which one would you pick?
The one just like really tough for me because the answer is obvious, but it's one of those things like I almost wish we didn't review the book because I feel like the book is such a large difference to its episode counterpart. If this was just episode, I feel like on an episode basis, Haunting Hour deserves his victory because it's like honestly, I would probably raise the score of what I gave Alien Candy to maybe 8.4 because it just feels like what Calling All Creeps episode should have been. But the book is a masterpiece. So because that's what won, just it being a timeless book, a timeless story. Honestly, there's really nothing for me that's wasted in the book. It feels like every page is used well. So I got to give it to Calling All Creeps. But in terms of episodes, for all the people out there who have been praising Calling All Creeps, go check out Alien Candyman. I think that you'll see that it's almost like an improved version.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, for me, I'm also going to give the win to Calling All Creeps' book. And to me, what makes this a quote unquote curb stomp against Alien Candy's episode isn't necessarily like the point difference here, or maybe the fun moments to be had, or maybe some dark avenues that both stories take. I think Calling All Creeps is the easy victor for the substance. Like, you cannot replicate that with, I mean, you could with Alien Candy, but then it would just be a reskin, rehash, whatever. But Alien Skin is Alien Alien Candy. Alien Candy is just a goofy sci-fi romp type of story with some dark elements, with a balance of horror and humor going on for it. While Calling All Creeps is more of a thematic tale about somebody going through some struggle, trying to overcome said struggle, and then just giving in to uh, you know, the anger they feel about the struggle they've been through and just let their anger out, um, quite literally and figuratively by the end of the story. And I just think it Calling All Creeps' book is a type of story that's going to linger with you no matter how long you read kids horror or just Goosebumps for that matter. If you power through Goosebumps, by the time you get to Calling All Creeps, trust me, you're going to be thinking about it by the time you finish Slappy World or House of Shivers. It's just one of those stories that are going to be with you forever. And whenever you think back to the series, it's always going to be one that's going to be up there in thought for you because it made you think. And because the book makes you do that, I think it has a lasting impact and a bigger legacy than Alien Candy ever did. That doesn't shortchange that Alien Candy is still a fun time and probably one of the more memorable Haunting Hour episodes out there. And Haunting Hour is a fantastic show. You know, Haunting Hour, often than not, puts Goosebumps neck and neck with it, and sometimes even flat out surpasses it in a lot of areas. Alien Candy, in my opinion, has way scarier scenes than Calling All Creeps ever had. And that says a lot. Alien Candy, I think, is a scarier product. It's also goofier, but you can't tell me that the bedroom scene and the Jurassic Park homage in the lunchroom is not scarier than anything from Calling All Creeps' book or episode, because you're just lying. That's just the flat out truth. And if that's what you're here for, then go check out Alien Candy's episode, because it probably will shock you in some areas. But Calling All Creeps is also shocking, but in that more intellectual way. So, take that for what you will. You might enjoy both. You might like one more than the other, but they're both solid pieces of media, and that's something commendable for both. So, yeah. We already know that Spongy probably would give it to Calling All Creeps' book. So for this podcast, the victor goes to Goosebumps over Haunting Hour. Sometimes that happens, and Calling All Creeps is definite in the deserved win here. And I think uh, sometimes it's clear and evident, and sometimes it's kind of close. But this one, it's more clear than possibly some other stories that we compare between Goosebumps and Haunting Hour moving forward. So yeah, that's our thoughts about Calling All Creeps and Alien Candy. Let us know down in the comment section if you got to enjoy this whole podcast. Um, what which ones do you prefer over the other? Do you like both? Do you not like both? Do you love both equally? Let us know. I'm going to put the Horrorlanders YouTube and social media handles in the description in the comment section down below, as well as Micah, the Ultimate Goosebumps fan. Please go sub him up. I know the Horrorlander recently had a massive bump up in his subscriber count. YouTube finally decided to grace him with the algorithm, and much deserved for his content. He makes fantastic content. Please go continue the love and support on his channel. Let's help Micah, who's also a great content creator, get up there, guys. They both deserve it. And please go check out Spongy's blog and his social media. He posts great content, and he covers a wide variety of stuff. He's a very knowledgeable guy, very good guy. Go show him some love. And if you're not subscribed to me, feel free to drop a subscribe if you would like. Please drop a like on this podcast. Let us know and feedback what you like about it, and maybe what you want to see us cover in the future. For our next episode, we already teased it in our previous episode, but we'll bring it back up here. We are deciding to do something unorthodox we haven't done on the podcast before. We're going to be looking at Platinum Age Kids Horror. So this is stuff pre-Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark, which means we're going pretty much back to the 80s or before. And we're going to be facing off two 1980s anthology episodes between 80s Twilight Zone with The Shadow Man, and we're going to be facing it off against Tales from the Dark Side episode called The Cuddy Black Sow. So please join us for our next episode, and we'll have a discussion there talking about Platinum Age Kids Horror. So if you're interested in hearing about that, stop on by. Until next time, we hope you have a great rest of your day or wherever you're at in life, and hope to see you soon. Take care, guys.